Hello and Happy New Year! It's great to be back for another episode of Reading Rule, y'all. Thanks for joining us in the new year. I'm Dr. Shay Parton, and we are starting the year off by looking back in time with Carly Heath's The Reckless Kind. Up until this point on this series and this channel, I've been advocating mostly for the reading of contemporary rural YA literature set in the US. This is mostly because there are canonical works that are taught often and feature historical rural settings. Think of things like Of Mice and Men, Grapes of Wrath. But I didn't read many stories about contemporary rural living that could serve as a mirror for me in my own high school education, and I didn't teach them as a rural teacher. Because of that, I've been mostly advocating for the teaching of contemporary rural stories that have a U.S. setting. With that said, I still recognize the importance and usefulness of examining a historical perspective and thinking about how history has shaped our now. Likewise, thinking about a more global perspective and experience of rurality can shed light on our local ones. So, I was so excited when Carly Heath reached out to me and introduced me to her beautiful book. We begin this 4-part deep dive with a summary and a reading of the first pages. Asta, Gunnar, and Erlend are best friends living on Hesteland, an island off the coast of Norway, in 1904. Asta has single-sided deafness and unconventional appearance and doesn't particularly care for the idea of marriage, despite being betrothed to a local boy named Niles. Instead, she prefers to spend her time acting in the theater with Gunnar Fugelstad and Erlend Fournier. Gunnar is the son of an unconventional, quote, heathen, farming and farrier family who is secretly in love with the wealthy Erlend Fournier, who directs plays at the theater his father sponsors. After a series of tragedies, Asta, Gunnar, and Erlend must figure out how to navigate being different in a small town that doesn't seem to appreciate or accept them. Will they be able to keep their found family together? You'll have to pick it up to find out. So, with that recounting of the summary, just a disclaimer before I continue to read these first pages. I am not in any way Norwegian or Scandinavian, and I generally have no idea how some of the names and places are supposed to be pronounced. Despite that, it didn't alter my enjoyment of reading and thinking about the book, so if I pronounce some things incorrectly, I apologize, but I also wanted to take the time to acknowledge that correct pronunciation is not a requisite of reading enjoyment or meaning making. So, this takes place in a place called Muskox Hollow in Hesteland. The first chapter is titled False Gods and Unnatural Passions, and there's an alternating narrative perspective, and the first perspective we get is Asta's. Gunnar's arm was gone, everything below the elbow. Though Erlend's mama had bundled it in calico bandages, I kept imagining his injury and what he must have endured during the accident. The sound of the snap, the jolt of pure agony, the hours he'd likely suffered until Herr Dr. Engen arrived to treat him. Gunnar Fugelstad was my best friend since childhood, and 1 month ago he'd almost died. The bleeding didn't do him in, but the septic infection nearly did, and now his skin shone pale as a corpse. Gunnar, a corpse. The vision struck me like a rifle ball to the gut. I had to sit down. Near the foot of Erlend's four-poster stood a dainty slipper chair. Quietly, I pulled it close to the side of the mattress nearest to where Gunnar lay beneath the quilts. As I settled onto the ornately patterned seat, I wondered why Erlend had asked me to come to his house to resume our theater rehearsals if my scene partner remained not only abed, but also terribly debilitated. Looking over Gunnar once more, I sighed in relief at the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Though it had only been a month since the accident, it felt like an eternity since I'd last seen him, the longest we'd been apart since we became friends. Erlend's parents, the Fourniers, had taken him in upon hearing about the calamity at the Fugelstad's farm, but each time I had tried to visit, Fru Fournier insisted Gunnar was quite unwell and quite unable to see anyone. Now finally I knew what she meant. Quite unwell meant Gunnar's arm was quite missing and the rest of him quite unconscious. I wiped my sweating palms on my skirt. Breeze from the Norwegian Sea usually subdued our summer heat, but this morning's air settled into an oppressive swelter. Despite the temperature, Gunnar slept beneath a blanket of silk jacquard, his head tilted to the side, his ginger lashes heavy and still. A scab, shaped like a falcon in flight, spanned the width of his forehead. A yellowing bruise marred one cheekbone. Sweat sheened upon his brow and corded his blood-red hair, and yet somehow he still smelled like cinnamon and rain. With my brown huckleback pinafore and Gunnar's many-hued wounds, the two of us seemed so out of place in the expanse of Erland's bedroom, double doors on one side, portiere on the other, imported piano, ski medals, rococo mirrors. The refined luxury forced me to find things I hadn't noticed about Gunnar Fugelstad before. The rough orange stubble on his jaw, oddly precocious for a boy who'd only just turned 17, and the hardness that remained on his face, even in slumber. With a steaming forehead and a twinge of guilt, I found myself thinking about the play. If Gunnar were to recover in time, his Benedict would have one arm. It might still work. Much ado began with men returning from war, so Benedict could have lost his limb in battle. Gunnar would likely have a number of clever ideas on how to play the part one-handed. He'd make it brilliant. The tip-top tip of Erland's slippers echoed through the bedchamber. A flush of heat invaded my chest. Sounds coming from things I couldn't see always made me anxious as a cornered hen. I was born with an unhearing left ear, so I developed a habit of turning to the right until I'd find the source of a sound. Erland tried to keep me from doing it on stage. An actress needs to face the audience, he'd say. But even after weeks of rehearsals, I still fought the urge to face my castmates. And in real life, where I'd be unrehearsed and unscripted, I'd always turn right, then right again, and right once more until I could finally identify the location of the noisemaker. Twisting in my chair now, I spotted Erland, standing in the doorway, script pages folded in his hand. Erland, glorious Erland. So, just a little taste of the writing style and the happenings at the beginning of the book. Even with just that first sentence, I felt equal measures of violently thrust into the world of the story and absolutely hooked. My family's no stranger to farming accidents, and I just had to know what happened. And then I kept reading for so many more reasons that I'll talk more about in my reaction video. I hope you'll stay tuned and join us next week for my analysis of place and rurality in the text. Until then, y'all come back now, would ya?